Trade Rumors just released their projections for arbitration this year. Joe and I are going to break down the Mariners arbitration projections, what guys could get non-tendered, and what guys are obviously locks to stay with the team. And then we're going to go into our report cards for the Seattle Mariners this year, for the offense, a lot of the pitchers, etc. How do we grade this season as a whole for a lot of these guys? Some of them are going to be pretty low. Thank you guys so much for watching episode 127 of the Hit It Here podcast, part of the Bleav Network, available on all your favorite podcasting platforms. Be sure to give us a 5-star review. And this, Joe, is the Detroit Tigers episode. They eliminated the Houston Astros. Live look at the Astros back there. You love to see it, baby. The Astros suck, and they are out of the playoffs. We are free from having to watch that terrible baseball team play baseball in October. Joe, I feel good. You don't look like you feel as good, man.
You were riding this high. This genuinely might be the happiest, most excited I have seen you in the entirety of the 2024 baseball season. Like, honestly, I have no words to describe the amount of elation this is bringing to you. Like, sure, I'm glad that they lost. I like the Tigers. I'm going to probably buy an Andy Ibanez jersey. Ibanez jersey. But the amount of joy that is just exuding from you over there, it's unparalleled, truthfully. And, you know, just like the #1 online sports gambling site, BetOnline, there's nothing to compare it to.
Thank you to BetOnline for being a sponsor for the Hit It Here podcast. BetOnline is the world's most trusted betting platform and your #1 source for everything football. BetOnline has every stat, every matchup, and even live odds and spreads to bet on during the games. And yes, I know baseball season only got about 2 weeks left, but guys, the football NFL regular season, it's in full swing. And if you think you know your stuff, get in on the $200,000 mega contest and pick 5 games against the spread every week for your chance at weekly prizes and a share of $200,000. Head to the website today to get in on the action. Bet online. The game starts here.
Joe, I appreciate you doing that BetOnline ad read, but you know what I didn't bet on this season? Was that the Astros would be eliminated by a team whose payroll projections, whose payroll of their 26-man roster for the wildcard series is less in its entirety than how much Josh Hader is making or made in 2024. That's right. Josh Hader made more money this year than the entire 26-man roster of the Detroit Tigers. Oh, dude, it just feels so good. All the crap that we got all year long, Joe, all year long from the Astros fans, so they could play and lose 2 extra games. They had as many wins this year in the playoffs as the Mariners did. That's right. Man. Oh, I'm flying high.
I don't know if I can match you on this. Like, genuinely, I don't know where to begin.
I need you to care.
I care, but clearly not as much as you do.
I think that feelings are just so arbitrary. Joe, similar to arbitration in Major League Baseball. Whoa! The Mariners had their arbitration numbers released this year. There are some guys that will probably get non-tendered. Joe, can you tell me a little bit about the numbers that we're looking at?
We are looking at like just the projection model from Trade Rumors, and it is typically pretty accurate when it comes down to what the final numbers do end up being. Starting from the top, Austin Voth projected 2.2 million. JT Chargois, 1.7 million. Luis Urias, 5 million. Trent Thornton, 2.1 million. Randy Arozarena, big ticket spender here, 11.7 million. Josh Rojas, 4.3 million. Sam Haggerty, 900K. Logan Gilbert, 8.1 million. Taylor Saucedo, 1 million. Cal Raleigh, 5.6 million. Gabe Spire, 900K. And George Kirby, 5.5 million as well. Some numbers here, a little bit lower than I maybe would have expected. Some numbers here, I guess, like, I'm just surprised. Like, Austin Voth, 2.2. I mean, he was signed for, I think, 1.5 in the offseason, so made himself 700K just with service time this year. There's definitely, like you're saying, some likely non-tender candidates here, but as far as money owed, the fact that Logan Gilbert's still going to be under 10 million next year, that's a good, like, it's not good, but for how the Mariners operate, that's a good sign. I would have, and I know that's like not necessarily how arbitration goes, where like guys will like jump up like this huge amount, because I think he got like 4.5 last year. Like, he basically doubled his worth almost. between 2023 or between 2024 going to 2025. But I was honestly expecting Gilbert to be in the double digits. I would have expected Kirby to be higher than Cal, but what do I know? The projection model knows best. Anything from there like that stands out to you specifically as far as guys that you think will return? Because we both have probably some thoughts about guys that will be non-tendered.
Yeah, so I want to just, for people that are not familiar with arbitration, basically the way it works is guys, when they come up to the major leagues, they have 6 years of service time generally. What are you looking at?
It's just seeing how long it's going to take you to try and explain arbitration. Remember the time that we tried to do it on stream?
Do you think that everyone that watches this knows how arbitration works? No, I'm trying to be a helpful, informative podcaster. Okay?
I'm aware of that. It's just...
And you're just being mean about it.
Your clock's ticking, buddy.
So players, when they come up to the big leagues, they have 6 years before they reach free agency. Generally speaking, it goes the first 3 years of their service time. They make the minor league minimum or major league minimum, which is, I Bleav, what, 950,000 or something like that nowadays, 750, something like that. And then in the next 3 years, they go to what's called arbitration. So basically, the way it works is the player's agent says a number they want the player to get paid that year. The team comes back with a different number. A lot of times teams, they'll just agree on what the money's going to look like. Sometimes they don't, and they go to arbitration hearings. Generally, the Mariners agree. They did not a couple years ago with Teoscar Hernandez, which was an interesting, for the first time in a long time, the Mariners had actually gone to a hearing, which I thought was strange. But generally speaking, teams will agree. And if they can't come to an agreement, then generally, and if they think a guy's getting paid too much, in this scenario, that's likely what Luis Urias will be. They're going to think that $5 million, and rightfully so, is more than he is worth. Therefore, they will non-tender him. He will not get a contract, and he will become a free agent. I think some things to note here, Joe, moving forward, is that with arbitration, guys, they cannot make less than they made the year before, even if a guy played horribly.
Yeah.
He cannot make less than he did the year before. It's not set necessarily on performance. It's set on your previous year's numbers. And so like first year guys, like I think Cal's in his first year. Yeah. First year of arbitration for Cal. Mm-hmm. Both. Yeah. First year for them. 5.6 for Cal and 5.5 for George. I mean, Cal had an unbelievable year. And so that is why you likely see his number being a little bit higher. I don't know if this is true, but I think that would be a record for first year catchers. In arbitration.
I know Will Smith, there's like a good comp to him, like talking about like pre-arb numbers going into his first year of arbitration before the Dodgers signed him to that extension. But I think like looking at these things, also like they can come to the Mariners with like, say Randy's projections 11.7, he goes to the Mariners with 12.5. They meet, they're like, no, we don't want to pay you 12.5. We'll give you 11.5. Then they'll go to a hearing, and then the arbitration, like arbitrators, that's just what it is, right? Yep. The arbitrators, yep. They will then decide then they'll kind of decide like who wins the case. Essentially, there's big drama with Corbin Burns and the Brewers a couple years ago as well. So like these aren't super cut and dry with what the numbers that have been said. Like I think Randy's a guy that if they went to a hearing with Teoscar, I could see them going to a hearing with Randy just based on like what they might ask for. But I think you said, I mean, you mentioned Luis Urias' name. That's a guy that's going to get non-tendered for sure. I don't see a reason for them to bring him back for $5 million. He could come back for less. They non-tender him, sign to a free agent contract, but like it's not going to be for $5 million. I don't think. Could he go get that somewhere else? Maybe, but I don't anticipate, especially with what the Mariners have in-house. I don't really expect that going in favor of Luis Urias. I think a guy that a lot of like talk towards the end of the season about like, well, we're going to hear about non-tendered guys. Josh Rojas was another one in there where his offensive value was very low, defensive value, sure, very high, but in a similar situation to Urias, like, could you replace him internally for less money? People are saying maybe $6 million for Rojas, only 4.3 is this projected model. I'd take Rojas back for like $4.5 million. Yep. I really would. Yeah. And I think he provides some good flexibility for you. It's not just in the infield. He can play a corner outfield spot if need be. Will make some relief pitcher appearances as well. But outside of Urias, and I guess Rojas is like the like hot button conversations about who should be non-tendered. I mean, Haggerty, unfortunately, with the injury and just like, sure, it's $900,000, but like at the same time, like, he just doesn't really serve a purpose on the roster at this point. Just like bringing him back, I think the relievers are interesting ones. Like Voth and Thornton, I think one of them gets non-tendered. You probably bring back
Yep.
one, non-tender the other, and then of the remaining three, Chargois, Saucedo, and Spire, is it 2 out of 3 there for you, or do you think it's just 1 out of 3 that get a contract? Like,
It's a tough question because I know, like, you look at JT Chargois, I think he's worth 1.7 million.
I
I
agree.
mean, think about what they paid Trevor Gott. Like, they paid him what, 1 million?
There's
or
1 million, and then they
1.1?
traded him, but still, yeah.
Right. So like that 1.7 million for Chargois, I think is a deal. I think he's well worth that. Austin Voth, I mean, 2.2 million is a bit hefty for him, but I mean, between him and Thornton, you might want to keep Thornton because you have, I believe, an extra year of control over him over Voth, but I could be wrong there. And then just maybe non-tender next year. I think the only locks are the obvious ones: Cal Raleigh, George Kirby, Logan Gilbert, and Randy Arozarena are the only locks to not get non-tendered. Everybody else, I mean, I could see it happening. I do think that Josh Rojas does stay on this roster, and not just something I forgot to mention. You will see guys it'll be they're called extensions, but generally what they are is just teams buying out arbitration years of these players so they don't have to deal with this process. So like we could see, oh, the Mariners signed Logan Gilbert to a 3-year extension, but really they just bought out his 3 arbitration years so they don't have to deal with this process every year. So that's something, if you guys do see it, don't get too excited until you know all the details about these extensions.
Yeah.
A lot of times what teams will do as well is give them a little bit more than they're projected. So in Logan's case, I'd say they'll give him 10 million this year, and then maybe like 11 million next year, where he might actually be worth more than that. And then like they try to buy out a free agent year in that situation as well, because then it's guaranteed money instead of arbitrary money. So it's a bit of a weird process, but it does lead to some interesting cases for some teams, maybe getting rid of some guys. A lot of teams to watch are like the Rays, for example. Cheaper team, don't want to pay guys a lot of money. One of the reasons why they traded Randy Arozarena is because they didn't want to pay him $12 million next year. And so for the Mariners, I think you have the 4 guys that are locks. And then Sam Haggerty, I think for sure is gone. Urias is gone. And then of the waivers, what are there, 4? 3.
Yeah.
4.
4,
Thornton,
yeah.
Chargois.
Oh, there's 5.
Sauce.
And Spire.
Oh, and Spire. Of those, I think only 2 of them come back. Because you look next year, you have Troy Taylor under contract. You have Munoz, of course. Matt Brash probably coming back. It might be a little bit later, but still coming back next season. Like Colin Snyder, you'll still have around. Like, in my opinion, the Mariners, one of the things the Mariners are going to do this offseason is try to make a lockdown bullpen. With Gregory Santos coming back next year, because of I think one of their strategies might be to make a death bullpen, which they kind of tried to do with like Santos and Brash and Munoz and even Stanek and whatnot. But I think they go all in on that because we know how good the starting pitching staff is. If they can make a lockdown bullpen as well, it kind of eases the need to go out there and add specifically bats. Not saying they won't, but it's a lot easier to get pitchers to come here than it is hitters. So if they go out there and try to entice the top of the line pitchers to come here, maybe that's their plan. They still do need offense, of course, but if that's the case, I would assume a lot of these guys do get non-tendered.
I would be curious to see, like, seeing the success of some of these postseason teams, like the Tigers having a very versatile, deep bullpen, the Guardians having 4 guys in their bullpen having seasons with ERA pluses over 200. The Padres going out there and making big deals at the deadline specifically. It's a little bit different than how the Tigers and Guardians bullpens were kind of constructed. But you look at the Padres, like if they make a deep run, it's hard to knock the fact that they've got Suarez, Marajón, Tanner Scott, Jason Adam, like going out there and making sure that your bullpen is 4 or 5 deep as far as like high leverage is concerned might not be a bad idea given how hard it can be to, I guess, get offensive talent to come to Seattle, and specifically with how much they struggled in 2024 outside of the final month of the year.
So with that, let's take a look at our report card. And honestly, Joe, let's start with the bullpen. It's tough to, I guess, nail down certain guys because they had such up and down years. I look at somebody like Gabe Spire. I gotta give him like a D. Like I think Gabe Spire, I give like a D because I had a lot of expectations. Same for Sauce, give him a D. Like both those guys compared to what I expected them to be this year, not good.
there's definitely a lot of guys in there. Like, would they be like they might not factor into like the 8-man bullpen next year kind of thing. Like any guy that's not going to be like part of that not rotation, but like part of that bullpen next year, like you're not looking at a very good grade because they didn't pitch well enough in this season to like really keep their spots. I mean, Edward Bizardo, it's not like a good name. Is he higher than Sauce and Spire? No, probably not. I mean, probably worse. But they're all in that like D category. Maybe not like an F. I don't think there's like a single bullpen guy, unless you want to say like Gregory Santos, because like he just wasn't healthy. But like that feels harsh. Like I'm not gonna go that far and say a situation like that. Maybe like a Ryan Stanek because he just was bad after like the first month and you had to trade him. But like I don't think there was a single F in the bullpen. Honestly, it's just like weird situations of guys like spending half their season here or up and down throughout the minors. Like guys that got added to the pile that didn't make do with anything, like Cody Bolton. He unfortunately just lost his role to Colin Snyder, and I'm not going to give a grade to Cody Bolton. Like out of those two that we said, like Spire, Sauce, Bizardo, I think those guys all just probably earned a D. Going a step up, like Trent Thornton was pretty good at, like was like really good, I'd say solid after we acquired him last year. Did not have, I'd say, that similar level of year. Was good, but like not great. I'd give him a C.
Right.
I'd give Trent Thornton, probably Austin Voth, a C as well. Like if I'm looking at it in that way, like that's how I kind of would evaluate both their seasons, like very similarly. Voth had a 3.69 ERA, Thornton had a 3.61. Like they're mid-leverage relievers that went out and lost you some games, but also pitched well in other outings where, okay, yeah, they were okay. They were decent.
I think that the way you're grouping them is probably the way we have to do it. And I think the next grouping up, the Troy Taylor, Andres Munoz, and Colin Snyder group, like I think they are all an A, especially what Troy Taylor was asked to do so quickly. And he earned that trust. Colin Snyder's a guy that came out of nowhere, and Andres Munoz really stepped up this year. To be the closer that the Mariners needed him to be. Obviously, going into last year, Paul Sewald was the guy. No, 2 years ago. What year was that? What year are we in? Paul Sewald was the guy in 2023. And then once he was traded, Andres Munoz had to step into that role. And this year, we really saw him kind of take the reins of the closer role and become the guy the Mariners needed him to be. The back end of the bullpen, the three, Troy Taylor into Snyder into Munoz, was a pretty solid bridge for the Mariners at the end of games. Don't get me wrong, there were certainly times where Andres Munoz didn't have his best stuff, especially at the beginning of the season. He had a little bit of a rough go of it, but overall, I think that I give the bullpen like a B minus on the year, like as a whole. Munoz, Taylor, and Snyder really anchoring that on the top end.
I have a group that may fall into the F category. Players, bullpen pieces that we traded for. Mike Baumann counts. Jimmy Garcia
I forgot about that
counts in that. And then JT Chargois. I don't want to say I'd give Chargois an F, but
Garcia,
yeah, like C. He'll prove his worth next year, I'd say, if we bring him back. But Garcia pitched well in his first 2 outings, was not good after that, and then got injured. That's an F. Unfortunately, that's an F. I mean, he pitched 9 innings, right? Like, it's not really like anything crazy to lose your mind over, like giving an F to someone for that, but tough. And then Mike Baumann, I mean, him and Garcia both had negative .4 WAR, the least valuable pitchers for the team in 2024. So those guys are definitely both Fs. I just wanted to throw that out there before we went into the rotation. But I think it is time to go through each starter. Do you want to start like preseason ranks of like where they were like their like turn through the rotation?
Yeah, I'd say so. Like if you
go Emerson Hancock or the other side.
So I feel like we should do Emerson Hancock and Jonathan Diaz as well. Like maybe put them together as like spot starters. You know what I mean?
Diaz.
But I mean Hancock did pitch a lot of games in Wu's absence. So Emerson Hancock, like what do you give him on the year? Because I think he did exactly what the Mariners needed him to do. I give Hancock a B on the year.
I was gonna say like C, like a C plus B minus range is probably where I'm sitting at. It wasn't pretty, but he did the job he needed to do. He did the job that he was brought in to do, which was to fill in spot starts for Brian Wu, who just couldn't stay healthy through parts of the season. I mean, 12 starts. if you're giving 12 starts to Emerson Hancock on the year, it's not terrible. I will say Fangraphs WAR is not very kind to pitchers. He is also a negative .4 with Garcia and Baumann.
Wow.
Yeah, pretty rude, I think, to Emerson Hancock for what he gave you. Sure, it's a 4.75 ERA. His FIP isn't great at 5.69. Nice. But I thought it was fine. Like C+ to B- is where I'd probably sit with him, just because I think expectations were a little bit lower. I don't even know if I want to say Jonathan Diaz. Like, he only pitched 9 2/3 in the bigs.
Believe it or not, Hancock's WAR was worse on reference.
Really?
It was negative 0.6. Yeah.
Kind of wild. Kind of
That
wild
is
that
wild.
we're willing to give a passing, more than a passing grade to
Yeah.
a guy with negative WAR.
I think it just goes to show how good this rotation was this year.
Sure.
Diaz, whatever. We don't have to talk about him. So going into the back end then, we could talk about Brian Wu now.
Yeah.
So if you would have asked me at the trade deadline, or maybe midway through the season, I would have given him like a C. But at the end of the year here, I got to give this guy an A. Because he wasn't healthy for most of it. That's why I would say C. But because he came out and did what he did for the last half of the season, I have to give Brian Wu an A. And like he was, every single time through the rotation, he looked like the best guy on the field. He looked like the best pitcher that you could possibly ask for. Like his because he wasn't able to stay healthy, it keeps me from giving him an A+.
Mm-hmm.
But on the year, I say Brian Wu was probably your best pitcher.
He went out there and he shoved night in and night out with probably one of the best fastballs in the game. Like he from where he was at the end of last year, I think in 2023 in general, the step forward that he took, I think is is it the best out of any of like the starters that we've seen in the last couple of years? Like, was his jump from rookie season to sophomore season better than Gilbert's? I'd say so. Was it better than Kirby's? It's tough because Kirby's in a weird situation because he took a step back this year, I think, in terms of expectations. And I don't want to fully compare all of them to one another. I'm giving Brian Wu an A. I think it's a safe A. He went out there, battled through some injury adversity as well, and then still managed to put together, the lowest starting pitcher ERA on the team, 2.89. It's only 0.05 better than another guy that's likely getting an A. But yeah, Brian Wu, he was spectacular for 22 starts and 121 innings. The next up is Bryce Miller. He's also getting an A. Both sophomore starters are getting an A from me, Colton. Like, very, very safely.
Bryce Miller gets an A+ for me. Like, he stepped up in the biggest stages that he possibly could this year. And I'm not going to lie, he was the guy who I was worried was going to be like a one-pitch guy, like someone who really couldn't didn't really have much of a strikeout pitch if they were on his fastball. And he proved me wrong. Like, when we were talking last year, probably at this time, we were talking about trading a starter. And I said, yeah, trade Bryce Miller.
Yeah.
And it's a very good thing they didn't, because look at what he did for this team. He's going to should get top 10 Cy Young votes. Like, he was that good this season. I think that the Mariners have 3 guys on their team that could get top 10 Cy Young votes. I don't think they'll all finish in the top 10, but I think all 3 of them could get 10 votes. And Bryce Miller specifically, I go back to the game against the Braves at the beginning of the year. I go back to the game in Houston just last month. Like, I think that he has stepped up to be one of the best pitchers in the game. And for the Mariners, the fact they were able to keep him last offseason was very much crucial for their 2024 season. Even though they didn't make it, where would they have been without Bryce Miller? I don't even want to think about it.
It wouldn't have been pretty.
So, Joe, that brings us on to George Kirby, who had a bit of a rough year compared to what we expected out of him. I know that we talked about him possibly being like a Cy Young candidate this year, but really he wasn't that. And I give George a C on the year, which, looking at his numbers, they were still good. But, like, for what we expected out of him, I think that it was just kind of a step back. And maybe that's because he was getting hit around too much, or he was leaving balls in the middle of the plate too much. Where are you at with George going into 2025 and kind of wrapping up his 24 season?
It's difficult because, he made all 33 starts. Like, he still finished for the Mariners as the top, like, reference or top Fangraphs WAR pitcher at 4.2. Like, still led the entirety of baseball in walks per nine. But you mentioned him getting hit around 181 hits on the year. That led the American League. And there's going to be like 2 months I want to point out where he was probably the best pitcher on the team. Like June and July, bro was nasty. In June, made all 5 starts, 31 innings, had a 1.74 ERA. In July, made 6 starts, had a 2.21 ERA across 36 and 2/3 innings. It was August that really was like, yo, he's not the guy that we needed him to be this year. A 6.84 ERA across 25 innings across 5 starts. Just not good. So, like, it's hard for me to say, even with the WAR being as high as it is, and like, oh yeah, he still was like not walking guys. Like, I can't give him anything higher than like a C+ because of how much we expected him to be. And then looking at August, like, completely just like tanked his season for me in my head. So I'd say a C+ for George. It's not good, it's not great, but like, it's still like, it's right there. Like, he still had a very, very solid year.
I think the next one we talk about then is Luis Castillo, because we know how good Logan was this year. Luis Castillo, we know that he's running out of gas. He's a guy that is probably on the tail end of his career right now. A guy who obviously the Mariners have signed for quite a while, but somebody who, he was still good. Don't get me wrong. And when Luis is on, he is on. But he does look like he's starting to maybe get a little more in the middle of the plate. His stuff is not moving as much as it used to. I give Luis like a B- on the year. Again, he was still fine this year. Did finish the season a bit banged up. What was his hamstring?
Yeah.
And so I give him a B- on the year. I'd be willing to give him a C+ as well. But Luis Castillo is no longer the ace of this ball club. He's a guy that we've talked about possibly getting traded. He's making $24 million next year, Joe. How are we feeling about 2024?
I'm lower. I'm giving him like a C-. I think that my expectations for him were still like, maybe not in like the top 10 of Cy Young finishing kind of areas, but I think coming into the year, like, I probably still would have put him on par with George Kirby, where I was like, where my mind was at with him. He pitched the fourth fewest innings out of the starters. Like, Miller finished with more innings than him. Sure, one more start, but yeah, like you said, Castillo a little bit banged up at the end of the year. Only 30 starts, 175 and a third innings pitched. Like, he had the highest home runs per 9 on the team at 1.28. Like, it wasn't what you needed out of a guy that should be your stopper, should be your rock, your very durable presence on the mound. It wasn't that. So I can't give it higher than George Kirby's season, in my opinion. I'm giving it a C-. I think it's not like in the D range, but I can see why people maybe could go towards that, but it was still fine. It's just like, I don't know, you look at what Logan and George did this year. Like, the home runs per 9, Castillo's higher on. The walks per 9 are basically doubled. And sure, that's because Logan and George know how to dominate the zone. Like, they do not give up walks like that. But looking at Castillo's being at 2.41 walks per 9, that's not good for a guy that's starting to lose some of that strikeout prowess. But a guy that should be another A, I think, out of the starting rotation. Logan Gilbert, 33 starts, 208 and 2/3 innings pitched, over 200 strikeouts, 3.23 ERA on the year, the all-star from this team outside of Munoz, who was an addition afterwards. But I give Logan an A. Like, I think even down the stretch when it wasn't his sharpest, I don't think that's enough to like put a blemish on this season. Like, I'm giving that an A from what I expected out of him, and which was him coming in to be the 3 again. I just felt like Logan, that's where he kind of had reached his ceiling. His floor was very high, but he passed his ceiling for me in this year. I'm giving him an A.
Yeah, I projected him to be the Cy Young of the Mariners, and I was, honestly. But he still surpassed a lot of my expectations this year. But I mean, leading the league in innings pitched to over 200 strikeouts, I didn't see that coming from Logan Gilbert. And yeah, he was a guy who, and you may have noticed something with his delivery that changed, but something about Logan Gilbert was different this year. His splitter specifically was insane. The spin rate on that thing is ridiculous. And he really found himself a true out pitch with that splitter. His fastball is still dominant. He was pumping it harder than he ever has before. 100 miles an hour multiple times this year in 2024. Logan Gilbert looks everything like an ace in the making, a guy who I think should start opening day next year, personally. And yeah, I think that when we at the start of the year talked about George Kirby being the ace going into at the end of this season, I think Logan kind of took that spot from him. And now maybe George is the 3 behind Luis Castillo and Logan Gilbert. I'm not sure. But overall, I give this pitching staff, the starting rotation, I give the pitching staff an A. An A. I do. Like, they're the one reason why the Mariners had any semblance of a chance at making the playoffs in 2024. Without this starting rotation, they're just the White Sox.
Yeah.
And so because of that, I have to give this rotation an A. I think every single guy stepped up to the plate. I mean, every single guy in this rotation would have probably been the number 1 on half the playoff teams so far this year.
Yeah, like there's definitely outliers to that. Like you're looking at Scooble on the Tigers, but like as far as like being like a 1A, 1B situation, like the Mariners were feared as far as if you had to face them in the postseason, like how are you going to go score runs off them? I think they allowed the least runs in all of baseball at like 580 something. Like this staff was largely the reason why they were in any form of contention, and the side of the ball that let them down, the offense. Well, we've got to give some grades to these offensive players now. Do you want to start with infield group, outfield group, catcher?
Let's start with infield.
Infield. Do you want to start with our guys?
Oh God, yeah. Let's start with our guys, Joe.
At the beginning of the season, Colton, we picked our guys. You know, as Locked On calls it, the flag guys. We're planting our flag in these 2 players. I picked Josh Rojas, someone who I viewed the projection model was very much so undervaluing, and he kind of fell just slightly a bit better than where he ended up being. The first month of the season, it looked like he was going to be an all-star. I don't know how much, I could probably look it up, but month by month, I think he accumulated all of his WAR in the first month. Pretty much.
Probably.
He sits in the year at the end at 1.9 Fangraphs WAR. I want to say he's probably at 1.5 by the end of April. So only 0.4 more the rest of the year because the offense went away for him. His bat was just poor the rest of the year. He finished the year slashing 225, 304 with a 336 slug, a 91 WRC plus, but we know how much great defense he did provide for the Mariners over there at third base. So my grade specifically for my guy, I'm going to give him a B-. I think it's a fair grade. It might be a little bit biased. The defense over there, it's invaluable how well he kind of replaced Geno Suarez as far as defense is concerned. It's just the offense leaves you a little bit more like wanting more. But the projection model didn't have, like, no one really expected Josh Rojas to hit a ton anyways in 2024. So kind of falls right at a B- for me.
Yeah, Joe, my guy is no longer on the baseball team. In one Tyler Lawrence France, he put up a 93 OPS plus with the Mariners this year, hit 8 home runs. I really believed in him as the first baseman for the Mariners because he went to drive line in the offseason. He looked like someone who was a prime candidate to kind of have a comeback season after 2023, and unfortunately that just wasn't the case. And eventually, he was non-tendered, or not non-tendered. He was DFA'd, and so my guy, I have to give him an F. He's not even on the team anymore. What choice do I have but to give my guy an F? He's not on the baseball team anymore. He was replaced by, obviously at the time, Tyler Locklear and Luke Raley. And then at the end of the season, it was Justin Turner largely over there at first base. So not a whole lot I can do there. Overall, our guys weren't great, Joe. Defensively, Josh Rojas was awesome.
Yeah, like that's the one crowning thing I can kind of hold on to was Josh Rojas's defense, but everything else for our guys was not pretty, to say the least.
Mm-hmm. So let's stick with around the horn here. I don't want to talk about Cal just yet.
Yeah.
Let's talk about first base as a whole, because it's hard because there were so many different guys that played some of these positions. So first base as a whole, like Justin Turner, Luke Raley, I think are the 2 that we can really look at right there. I give them like a B+. Like,
yeah,
I think that bringing in Justin Turner was exactly what the Mariners needed to do at the trade deadline. Luke Raley was great as well, a really big spark plug for them. And, again, the stats that you don't see, like you said, I believe last podcast, first guy to celebrate, first guy to catch the walk-off guy. Like, that was Luke Raley. Set a new career high in home runs, was a big left-handed power bat for the Seattle Mariners they needed. And Justin Turner showed up and that he still knew how to just be a pure hitter. And because of that, I think first base gets a B+ for me.
I think it's unfortunate that like Rayleigh did have to kind of slide into that role. Not like maybe unfortunate like for his expectations here as like roaming the outfield, but you're looking at a guy that plays with such a level of tenacity that like keeping him kind of locked into the bag at first base seems a little underwhelming for his play style at times. Like seeing him run is just hilarious. Like not being able to watch that as much, aside from foul balls going back at first base, definitely left me wanting more. But yeah, Turner, I mean, with the Mariners, had a 126 WRC plus. Like, bro just is a professional hitter through and through. Played decent enough defense over there for me to not like be like, oh, that wasn't pretty. And then honestly, there were times with like Rayleigh, like, again, he's kind of out of position at first to an extent. Like, he's played it before, but it's not his primary like used to position. So like defensively, I mean, first base is always a little bit hard to kind of measure, but both guys I think provided you plenty enough with the bat to you're not worried about it over there at first base. But yeah, B+. If I could give each individual, I'm giving Luke Rayleigh an A, and I'm giving Turner like a B, which would probably average to a B+. Maybe Turner gets higher than that, like for whatever reason. I mean, a lot of people like Justin Turner. A lot of people want him back, so I don't necessarily think that there's anything lower than like a B+ for either guy, I think is like selling their season short. Like they both provided a lot of value to this team. But second base, Colton, ever since the scars of Robinson Cano's contract, they've just left such a black hole at second base for whatever reason. It's cursed. The next guy that comes up the next guy that plays second base for the Mariners needs to be someone that comes up through the system. It cannot be someone that they go out and acquire, go out and trade, go out and sign. They need to have someone homegrown to break the curse, because Jorge Polanco, I mean, is this 3 years running that second base gets an F? Like, it's terrible.
Jorge Polanco a D.
Okay.
I mean, you look at his numbers, he put together a 93 OPS plus season. Like compared to Colton Wong's like 35,
yeah,
and Adam Frazier's like 60 or something like that. Like, I mean, dude still hit 16 home runs. Don't get me wrong. At the beginning of the season, he was awful. But there were times, especially in the second half of the season, where we're like, do we pick up Jorge Polanco's option for $12 million? Like, the answer is obviously no. But the fact that we even considered it is kind of makes it so I have to give him a D in that regard, just because we haven't had that kind of power from second base. But yeah, it was definitely teetering on an F. Like before the All-Star break, we were talking about getting rid of him, like DFAing him before the All-Star break. And so, yeah, it's a very interesting season for Jorge Polanco, a guy that the Mariners brought in to fix that position, a guy that I wholeheartedly believed could fix that position. Unfortunately, that was not the case, so Polanco gets a D from Polanco. Polanco's got a D.
Yeah, he receives the D from Colton in this one. It is the best second baseman season of the last 3, if we really want to go that far of comparing like garbage, but yeah, I guess it's not quite the F that I wanted to like emphatically give, but it just wasn't good. So out of solidarity, I'll also give Polanco a D for this one. His double play partner, JP Crawford, is it any, I mean, given expectation, given what we needed out of Crawford compared to his season in 2023, I'm not going to say an F. I might give it, I'm going to like, is it an F? Like given like what we needed out of Crawford, like, is it really that much of a drop off that it's F worthy?
Like that guy was supposed to be your captain, supposed to be the guy that leads the team, supposed to be your leadoff hitter. Like everything that the only thing that JP did this year was he was decent defensively. That's it. Like everything else, he was Brendan Ryan. Like compared to what he did last year, where he was crushing the ball, I don't know how he can receive anything other than F. Nobody on this team disappointed me this year more than JP Crawford, and that goes for Mitch Garver as well.
Oh, man. It's hard because like I'm using, I guess, like overall season success as like the barometer here. Like, sure, should I be looking at WAR as how to calculate what grades they get? Like he was the 7th most valuable position player on the team with 1.6 Fangraphs WAR. But like, given what we expected out of him, like it's hard not to agree with that he should be given an F.
because of what we needed out of JP Crawford. I'm gonna be a bootlicker. I'm gonna give him a D plus. I think defensively it was fine. I think there were moments where he definitely like provided some as far like good like morale boosting type situations of like him just being a leader vocally in the clubhouse. It's just on the field, specifically in the batter's box, it wasn't good. And maybe I'm just holding on to hope for JP, but I can see why people would give him an F.
Another guy that I'm almost willing to give an F offensively, Joe. I know that you already gave him a grade. So, but Josh Rojas, like, I don't necessarily know who else we talk about at third base, like Dylan Moore. I guess those two.
Yeah.
You already gave your grade for Josh Rojas. I'm giving Rojas like a D plus.
Damn.
Like
that's a big disparity.
Yeah, just offensively, I thought after what we saw out of him in the first month, like he was going to be good. And like, but defense, you know what? No, I'll give him a C minus. Nah, C. Defensively, he should like possibly win a Gold Glove. That's how good he was defensively at third base. I think he should at least be nominated. I don't think he will be.
Sure.
But I think he should be. But offensively, it's just, man, every time he came to the plate after like the month of like May, I was like, that's an automatic out.
Yeah.
And that's the thing that I struggle with the most. Dylan Moore, somehow, some way, dude put up like a 2.5 win season.
Yeah, he is by Fangraphs the fourth most valuable player for this team offensively,
which is unbelievable to me because he, in my opinion, was terrible.
But like he didn't pass the eye test, is what I would say.
But apparently he got the job done based on advanced metrics. So I don't know. I give third base overall like a C minus to a D plus.
Which is, I mean, Ty said it on our 999 live stream. We were like, what, the fifth most valuable like production out of third base? Like, it's a weird situation. Like, given what we watched and what we had to like just bear witness to the entire season, it did not feel like there was a lot of success coming out of third base. I mean, I'd give Dylan Moore probably like a C minus as well. I mean, stole 32 bags.
True.
Pretty solid base runner, obviously. I mean, there were some mistakes made, but it just, you're not going to be penalized, I think, as much for boneheaded mistakes like running to third on a ball hit to the shortstop kind of a situation and stuff like that. But a 105 WRC plus from on the year, popped 10 homers. Like, he did okay. It wasn't great, but it was okay.
So that brings us, Joe, to left field. And this is an interesting one because it's been kind of a rotating door up until Randy got here. We already talked a little bit about Luke Raley, so I don't want to really talk about him here. But Dominic Canzone, I think, is someone that makes sense to talk about here. I mean, F. He gets an F for the year. He was terrible. And obviously sent to the minors, and we never saw him again. But Randy, I'm going to give like a B to Randy for coming in and stabilizing left field for the Mariners. And while it wasn't great at times, especially at the very beginning where he looked like he just didn't care, he, towards the end of the season, really seemed to settle in with the Seattle Mariners and become a big part of this lineup. And I think that a guy the Mariners needed. And once he showed up, the Mariners left field spot was taken up by him. He was batting 4 like every single night. Overall, left field, I'm going to give a B minus to. Mainly brought up by Randy Arozarena, though.
Yeah, I'd give Randy a B as well. I mean, he's got a pretty high strikeout rate, 28.5%. It's not great. He's walking a decent amount, 11.7 as well, so kind of I feel like it offsets it a little bit there. Put up a 122 WRC plus with the Mariners. Like, it's a good season. Like, good, like, half season, or, post All-Star break. 54 games for Randy and left field. I'm pretty satisfied with what he did. Dom, yeah, I mean, unfortunately got injured, got off to a hot-ish start, but then just couldn't make adjustments. Strikeout percentage is just, it's 28.2, just could not make those adjustments that he needed to. Is he a quad A player? Is he a fourth outfielder, fifth outfielder next year? Probably. You don't really need him, and Randy took over that spot in left field for sure and will likely do it for the next year. Maybe even 2 if they decide to keep him beyond that. But I'm giving Randy a B. I don't even want to give Dom gets like an E. Did not like complete enough of the course to receive a grade, in my opinion.
That's fair.
Yeah.
That's understandable. Moving on over to right field. Now,
Oh.
yeah, we're not going to talk about Julio yet. I think we save Julio and Cal for the end. Right field began the year as Mitch Haniger. And unfortunately, like Mitch just needs to hang him up. Like, it sucks, but at the start of the year, dude, opening day, and he hit that home run. I'm like, oh my god, like Mitch
Cinema.
is back, baby. And then unfortunately, the rest of the way, he just looked like a shell of his former self. Mitch needs to hang him up. It sucks, but it's true. We saw Jonathan Clase play this year as well. Like, I don't know, right field until Victor Robles got here was similar to left field, just a rotating door. It was ugly. And unfortunately for the Mariners, they're stuck with Mitch Haniger moving forward. I give Mitch like a D. Like, I wasn't expecting a whole lot out of him, but I was sure as hell expecting a lot more than what he gave us. But then we get to Victor Robles, I give him an A plus.
Yeah.
Like, he was the best player on this team for like 2 months. And I mean, I stole like 39 bags or something like that.
I think 34 in the year, 30 with the Mariners.
34. Yeah. And so where does that leave right field as a whole for me? I think it is so buoyed by what Victor Robles did. It puts it at like a B. But Mitch Haniger really brings it down.
Yeah, Mitch was your least valuable player by Fangraphs for it, -0.6.
Ugh.
Just doesn't do anything for you offensively. The only thing he does for you defensively is make really strong throws, which is cool. But everything else, like, it's just not good out there, really. Mitch, it's just, I agree. Just kind of needs to hang him up. Robles gets a resounding A+. Like, Broke came in and completely changed the trajectory of his career, earned himself an extension. Like, very much so, did as much as he probably could in these 77 games that he played with Seattle. You want to lump Haniger into, like, the DH conversation as well, like, we'll get there in a sec, but right field as a whole, I mean, like, it's hard. We're usually pretty in tune with one another, like how we kind of feel about the season. Like, it's probably like a B- to a B. Robles completely lifting that up from the trenches of having Mitch Haniger start out there. Rayleigh sometimes is out there as well. Same thing with Dom. Like, it's just kind of like a weird rotating door, but now they have some stability, and it's Victor Robles, your third most valuable guy as far as FWAR is concerned. Like, I'm feeling pretty okay with it going into 2025, if I'm being honest, but you just need to see Robles out there as much as you can and not have to worry about penciling in Mitch Haniger. As far as right field is concerned, if he gets a DH day, if he's still with the team, that's fine, because your other DH, Mitch Garver, I mean, they both get Fs. As far as, like, for me personally, Haniger gets an F, unfortunately. Garver gets an F. It's just, your team would have been one win better without both of them.
Damn.
Technically.
That's crazy. Yeah. Wait, and the Mariners missed the playoffs by how many games?
1 game. No.
Yeah. Did you fall?
Yeah.
I thought maybe you fell out of your chair. Yeah, Mitch Garver gets an F. Dude was legitimately impossible to watch and so infuriating to watch him pop up to the infield, just put his head down and run. Like, no, show some emotion. Show that you care that you suck. Like, Mitch Garver's a great dude. Like, seems like a really great dude. Got a good head on his shoulders, but my goodness, was he awful this year. Was relegated to a backup catcher role. Because of how bad he was. And yeah, both Mitches, I mean, just Mitches squared, F all around. Unfortunate that both guys are owed quite a bit of money. You have basically $40 million wrapped up in those two players. And going into 2025, that's going to be rough to handle. But the DH spot as a whole just gets an F.
In shocking news, the Mariners have not solved the two main problems offensively between second base and DH for the third straight year. Mike Ford has been the best Mariners DH since Nelson Cruz left.
Dude,
the
scars of Robinson Cano and Nelson Cruz just won't leave us alone. You know what I mean? Let's talk about center field, Joe, because Julio Rodriguez had a very interesting year. Obviously, he finished the year on fire as one of your best hitters, ended up hitting over 270 with a 2020 season, and was pretty valuable to the team. Was he number 1 or number 2 most valuable?
Number 2.
Number 2, yeah. I figured.
Overall, I give Julio a B-
Okay.
to like a C+, because
compared to expectations this year, he was nowhere near it. He was awful for his first like half of the season. He was terrible.
Mm-hmm.
He deserved every bit of criticism that came his way. Injuries did not help him as well. Julio needs to be better. He needs to be the MVP caliber player that everyone thinks he can be, and no, we all know he can do it. It's just he needs to find a way to put it together, and because of that, he's getting like a. I'm gonna go with a C plus for Julio. Only buoyed by that second half of the year.
Yeah.
If he had continued at that trajectory, he would have gotten a D.
Oh,
Like
could have been F territory with how
Yeah,
like
could have been.
expectations were. The problem with Julio is last year, similarly kind of like a down year for a bit, and then August happens like, oh, that's the Julio we love and know. No and love is the way you say that. Why'd I say love first? That was weird. And then this season gets injured as he's about to start heating up, it seems like. Has to go on the shelf for 2-ish weeks. Comes back and like isn't really fully himself quite yet. It's an ankle sprain. It's tough to kind of battle through. But then towards the end of September, he then propels himself to another 2020 season, becomes the second most valuable player on the team as far as FWAR is concerned with 3.8. I'm just giving him a flat C, right? It's his worst season of his professional career. He still played 143 games, even with that injury. Like, yeah, like he only missed 19 games, which is pretty surprising given like how this season felt with him. It's the counting stats and like the pretty much just like his power that just wasn't there. Only 20 home runs on the year. His slugging was 409, very much so his worst of his career. It's just Julio, we know what he can do. We just need to see it over a longer time span than a singular calendar month. Even if it's 2 months, like he's probably more valuable than Cal at the end of the day. If he has 2 hot months instead of just 1. But yeah, Julio, he just gets a C from me. It was pretty good defense. He's not going to be a Gold Glove finalist, I don't think, this year. I think he was on his way to, and then just kind of like slowly started. He didn't rob as many home runs as he should have. You know what I mean? That's really like what they're looking for as far as the Gold Glove committee is. Like how many home run, like Parker Meadows, right? He'll get nominated probably because he robbed some home runs. But yeah, Julio, he gets a C. It was fine, but I can understand why people might want to go lower just given expectations, but it's hard to argue after that final month that he didn't basically pass the class, if that makes sense.
So that means that leaves us with one spot, Joe. And this is the MVP of the team. No doubt. I don't think anybody can argue that. Honestly, should get MVP votes.
Mm-hmm.
Like actual.
Yeah.
Like top 10 MVP votes. And that is Mariners catcher Cal Raleigh. What was it? 34 home runs for him, 100 RBI. Was lightning behind the plate defensively. Stole some bags this year as well. Yeah. Obviously set the record for most home runs by a catcher in his first 4 years and most home runs by a Mariner in his first 4 years. Cal Raleigh has cemented himself as the best catcher in Mariners history already, in my opinion. He's already surpassed Dan Wilson, in my opinion. And I know a lot of the people in the comments, I'm going to hear flack for that.
No.
All right. Sorry. I'm sorry, old heads, but it's true. Cal Raleigh is the leader of this team. There's no question about it. It's now 4 years running that he set a new career high in home runs for him each year. His power from the right side specifically is something that really stood out this year. Overall, Cal Raleigh gets an A+ for me, and if I could go higher, I would. I know that people see batting average and they freak out, but everything else about Cal Raleigh is incredible in 2024.
The thing that I look at the most is like how much he impacted the pitching staff. There's like every single time a Mariners starting pitcher is asked something about how are you being successful or blah, blah, like they always turn back to Cal Raleigh to some extent. Like how much he goes into every single, like how much prep he put, like who wins in a fight, Batman with prep time or Cal Raleigh with prep time? It might be a fight to the, like they both might go out, right? Like this is the one guy that might be able to take Batman out with prep time. Bro puts his heart and soul into coming into the stadium, into game day, as prepared as he possibly could be. If he could play a full 162, he probably would. But as a catcher, like he only missed 9 games. I mean, he only missed 9 games. Like as a catcher, sure, Garver caught some, Sebi Zavala caught some, but like Cal caught the most innings in all of baseball this year. Mm-hmm. He did everything that he could for this team to make sure that they were as good as they could be. Sure, he struck out a lot. Whatever. Like, it's not that big of a deal when you're doing as much damage as he was. And do I think that, like, maybe expectations might be a little high for him going into next year? Like, I don't think he's going to hit 35 next year. He could, but I don't think he will. Depends on how much DH time he gets. As soon as he transitions from a full-time catcher into, like, more of like a split time, part-time catcher, part-time DH, you might see the home run number hit 40 because he's got that level of raw power and he does hit better as a DH just naturally because he doesn't have to exert as much energy because he's not catching. It's without question. Like, he gets an S+, you know what I mean? Like, bro is the MVP. Like, he did everything that he could, I feel like, in this entire season to be the best player on this team from, like, day one. Like, Cal Raleigh deserves the flowers. He deserves the C on his chest if they want to go that far. I mean, I don't know many baseball teams that do these days, but regardless, Cal Raleigh, 5.4 F4, a top 15 position player in all of baseball, tied with William Contreras from the Brewers as far as being the most valuable catcher. Like, if you're filling out an all MLB team, it's William Contreras or it's Cal Raleigh. Depends on what your preference is. But Cal put together an amazing season again.
Overall, I think that I give this team this year like a C.
Sure.
I mean, realistically, it should be a pass or fail grade, right? For this team, it should be, did they make the playoffs? No? Okay, it's an F.
Yeah.
Like, that's the ultimate goal. But I think this team gets a C. Offensively, they probably get like total. Like, I mean, how do you not give them an F, right?
Mhm.
Just because they were putting up some of the worst numbers in club history. But I'll give them a D for the little bit that they were able to come back at the end of the year. On the pitching staff side, I'll give them a B, largely anchored down by the bullpen. The starting pitching gets an A from me. So overall, I give this team a C, Joe.
Yeah, I think every single thing that you just said is kind of where my brain's at. Like, individual grades might get a little different here and there, but like, yeah, the offense, you were hardly better than the White Sox for the large part of this season, and it was saved by a big hitting philosophy change and managerial change. That's really what it comes down to. So yeah, like, offense gets a D, could be like an F, but like, you're the 12th, I think, best WRC plus in all of baseball. Like, the fact that we're giving that a D, it's because the strikeout rate's so high. It's because the batting average is so low. There's things that stand out to you that definitely weigh down that grade, but overall, like, it has to be like in the C range for the overall team if you're not giving it a pass or fail because of how good the pitching staff was, mainly the rotation, the entire season.
That's going to do it from us here on episode 127 of the Hit It Here podcast, presented on Bet Online, the Kansas City Royals episode of the Hit It Here podcast, because they just beat the Baltimore Orioles to advance to the ALDS, and go Mariners.